garden classes here at the garden. So if you want to get more into depth on like how to specifically grow tomatoes or squash or peppers or anything like that, you're welcome to come to those. These are all completely free. You can register for them beforehand, and I'll put the link to the website with all this information. But I just want to share this resource with y'all so you know about it and can potentially learn more after this. So, what is composting, which is our main topic today? Composting is the natural process of breakdown that occurs in all organic materials. So, essentially, it's taking things that used to be part of nature, and instead of sending it to the landfill, we put it back into nature after it's broken down. So, we use composting to create free, nutrient rich natural fertilizer for our gardens. And so, you can see in this little diagram here, you have your apple tree that you ate the apple and then you had the core left. You put the core into your compost, it breaks down, and the nutrients that were available in the core now are part of the compost, and you can use that compost to then grow another plant. So it's a lovely cycle. So compost is really, really wonderful for gardening. First is that it holds water really, really well. So especially if you're gardening outside, if you're gardening in raised beds, and you don't want to water as much, if you use more compost, it will hold water so much better than if you just have like sandy topsoil. So it's really great for that. It improves cation exchange capacity, which is like a big sciencey term, but essentially it makes the nutrients that are available in the soil more available to your plants by kind of changing the chemical composition of the soil. So there is sometimes you'll have nutrients in your soil, but the soil won't be able to hold on to it. And it'll wash away when it rains. And compost helps soil hold on to all those nutrients. So it means that you have to fertilize less because the compost is making those nutrients stay in the soil. And then the compost itself will slowly release nutrients into the soil as it's breaking down. So wonderful for growing things like vegetables that need a lot of nutrients. And then it also will house beneficial microbes and bacteria that create all of this like beautiful network in the soil that helps your plants out. So very, very great for gardening. And then it's also really good on a more global scale. It's really good environmentally. So a lot of our food waste will typically go into landfills where it doesn't really have the conditions to break down. So about 60% of our waste are things that are compostable. And so if we start composting those things instead of sending them to the landfill, we're just doing a better job environmentally. Food waste is also responsible for a large percent of greenhouse gas emissions because it creates methane, which is more potent than carbon dioxide. So very, very helpful to reroute these things back into the garden where they would naturally be rather than in the landfill. And then for your wallet, you don't have to go and buy fertilizers because you'll be making your own in your backyard with waste products, completely free. So very exciting. So if you are looking to get into composting, a couple of things you want to identify at first. First is where you're going to set up your compost and like how much space you have for it. And if you have things that can maybe be turned into a composter, or if you'll have to buy stuff. How much time you have and how much effort you want to put into it, because there are different ways to compost, and some require a little bit more time and attention and focus, and some are just like, yep, I'm throwing everything in a pile. So know how much time you have before you like set out your system so that you can make it work for you. How much waste your household produces, and what type of waste, and that will help you figure out how big your bins need to be, and if you need to supplement from other things. So the three ingredients, and these are not the ones people typically think of when they think about composting. The three things you will need to have in your compost pile are water, oxygen, and heat. Heat we'll talk about a little bit more, but it is important to have airflow in some part of your compost, and it's important to have water be able to penetrate as well. And then the fourth ingredient is that waste. So there are tons and tons of things that can be composted. This is a short list, but any food waste, especially produce waste. So anything that came from a fruit and vegetable, that can be composted. I've had people ask questions about like, Can citrus be composted, like your orange peels or your lemon peels? And yeah, they can. They might slightly change the pH of your compost, but not a meaningful amount. If all your composting is orange peels, that's not ideal because you like having diversity of materials. You have diversity of nutrients in your final product. But yeah, you can compost orange peels. You can compost things like coffee grounds, tea leaves, eggshells, manure. You can compost grass. You can compost your hair clippings, which might be a little weird, but you can. You can compost like the lint in your lint trap. You can compost napkins, paper plates. If you are composting those like single-use products, you want to double check that it doesn't have a waxy finish. If it's got a waxy finish, that means that plastic was applied, and that plastic won't break down. So, or it'll break down into microplastics, which you don't necessarily want in your compost. Best practice is to do the unbleached ones, but I also compost like paper towels that are white or paper plates that are white. So there's some additional chemicals in there, but you can't avoid all the chemicals. Newspaper, leaves. Leaves are a great source of compost. Straw, wood chips, branches. If you've cut down a tree, you can compost like stumps, toilet paper rolls. So there's so many things that can be composted. But essentially, if it comes from nature and it would biodegrade, you can put it in your compost bin. Things that you do not want to compost are plastic, because plastic will not break down, glass, because it will not break down, metal, styrofoam, and then this is a weird one, but if you have a black walnut tree, you want to avoid composting anything that comes from the black walnut tree. And that is because black walnuts contain a chemical called jugalone that is produced in their roots, but it's also present in their in the husks of the nut and in the leaves and in the branches. And jugalone can inhibit the growth of other plants. So it's a mechanism that the black walnut developed so that it could like, you know, really have a good space to grow for itself, because it'll damage plant growth within like its drip line, which is great for black walnuts, but not so great if you want to grow tomatoes. So if you are growing a lot of vegetables, you don't want to put things from the black walnut tree into your compost bin. So there are a few things that you technically can compost, but they are a little iffy, and that's meat and dairy products. So things like cheese or fish or chicken, like you can compost those and they will biodegrade, but they will also probably smell and they will also probably attract raccoons or mice or just flies. Like, so technically, if you're really, really on top of it, you could compost these things, but most people do not because they're just a little harder to work with. So typically, most things you would compost fall into two categories. They're either a brown, which means they have a higher amount of carbon in them, or they're green, which means they have a higher amount of nitrogen in them. And usually browns are things that are like yard waste, or they're brown, like brown bags, leaves, sawdust, straw, wood chips. Like they just typically they do look brown, which is helpful, but they're things that are high in carbon. And then greens are usually things that are coming from your kitchen. So that's kind of a good way to distinguish is greens are your kitchen waste and browns are your yard waste usually. So greens are like fruits and vegetables, your coffee grinds, your eggshells, tea bags, things like that. And the reason it's important to know which category it falls into is because if you are doing a hot composting system, you need to make sure you have the right ratio. So if you're doing a hot composting system, you want to have 2/3 browns to 1/3 greens, or 1/2 brown to 1/2 green, so that it breaks down properly. Hot composting is where you get that ratio right and it breaks down really quickly, and it breaks down really like clean, and it heats up the compost as it does. So that the heat is just a natural byproduct. So you can use it in about 3 months. And and it will eradicate diseases and weed seed and pests, and it will attract beneficial microbes. So if you really want to do composting quickly and you want to do it with everything that you have in your yard, hot composting is great. But the drawback is that it requires more attention because you need to make sure that ratio is right. And you do need to turn it and monitor it a little bit more frequently than you would a cold composting system. But as you can see, they generate a lot of heat. So when you break into a hot compost pile, it will steam, which is super cool and fun. And usually the way that people do these hot composting systems is to get that ratio right, they will do a layer of greens and then a layer of browns and then a layer of greens and a layer of browns. So you could have your food waste that you bring out, and then you have your leaves that you put right on top of it. So you make sure you maintain that ratio. Cold composting is what most people who have a home do. And that's just where you throw in whatever yard waste you have in a pile, and eventually it will break down. So this is the easiest way to compost. The drawback is that it can smell because it's not breaking down quickly, because it's not in that right chemical ratio. It won't kill pests or weed seed or disease. So if you are cold composting, you don't want to put weeds with seed heads on it in the compost. You don't want to put things that were diseased. Like if your tomatoes looked really sad at the end of the season, you don't want to put those in your compost pile. You don't want to put like fruitlets from your fruit trees that might have bugs in them in your compost pile. So that is the one of the drawbacks, and that it will usually take about a year. So usually people who are doing a cold composting will add to it, and then they'll have one that's broken down that they're pulling from. Some of the common issues people run into. Oh, another note for hot composting, you want to make sure that you have a big enough pile. If you don't have at least a 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot cube of compost, there just won't be enough material to heat it up. So you can see these piles are all pretty big. But some of the common issues that people run into when they are composting, the pile is too wet and it doesn't smell good. You may not have enough airflow. It may be that you added too much water, or that you just have too many food scraps. And I think that's one of the really common issues people run into, is they just think of composting as like your apple cores, your old lettuce, like all your food scraps, which are all greens. And so if you have an issue with it just not smelling good, you need to add some browns in there usually. Turning the pile also helps. If the pile does not heat up, it might be too small, and it might also be too dry. And you could fix this by making a bigger pile, or by adding water when you turn it, or you can insulate it. So we'll look at some. So for example, if you did a composter like this, if you wanted to insulate it, you could put some straw around it if you weren't generating enough waste to make a big compost pile. Some other common issues, if the pile is damp and it doesn't smell bad, but it won't heat up, you don't have enough greens. So on the other end, so if you're just doing a compost pile of leaves and grass and mulch, it won't break down super fast either, because you need those food scraps to balance it out. If your pile is attracting animals, you may have put meat or dairy scraps in it, and you want to avoid that. Or that you were putting fresh food into it and you weren't covering it with browns. So cover your food scraps, or get a top on it. You can also put a top on your compost pile. So there are a lot of options to compost outside. And I'm just going to go through a bunch of different options, because truly it's a very straightforward. You just are making a pile of waste. So whatever you already have, if you just want to do it the cheapest way, you can do whatever you have in your garage. Probably you can make a composter out of. So for example, you can do a wire bin. Wire bins are great because you get some airflow. And then you can also see what the bottom looks like. So you can see if that's breaking down if you're doing a cold composting system. You could just do a pile. A lot of people just do a pile. And then you can turn it from one side to the other. You could buy a compost. So you could get these at Lowe's or Walmart, Home Depot, and they may have some other fancy things, like they may have a cover that you can put down so you don't have to worry about animals getting in. They may have a screen. So if you have some partially broken down compost, you can put it through the screen and sift out the stuff that was too big and break down. You could use pallets. A lot of people make composters out of old pallets because they're just so many and they're easy to access. So that's super easy. A lot of people also like spinner composts. The one drawback of these is they're not very large usually. They're usually about this size. And so you may run out of space really quickly if you go through a lot of waste if you're a bigger household. And they won't generate as much heat because they're smaller. But people like the spinner ones because you can add in your waste, and then you can add in and try to maintain that ratio if you want. But then you can spin it. It's got a little handle on the side, which is less labor intensive than like turning it over with a pitchfork. One of the systems I like, because I'm not very organized, is I like just doing a trench in my garden. And so you can see here you've got your row of something growing, and then right next to it, you can dig a little trench and throw your food waste in there, and then you cover it back over. So every year when I start my garden, before I top off my beds, I put whatever food waste or yard waste I had that wasn't broken down yet. I put that in as a layer, and then I put my compost or my topsoil on top. But you can do this throughout the growing season as well. If you have space in your garden, you can just start a trench, and as you get food waste, you just toss your, your food waste in there and cover it back over. It's super straightforward. A lot of people will do a 3-bin system. And so this is dependent on how much space you have. But for a cold system, you can do, one that you're actively adding stuff to. And then you have one that you're leaving alone that's breaking down. And then you have one that is ready to use for the season. And this is a good system to set up because the cold system will take a long time. So if you have the space, and if you don't want to put the effort into maintaining that ratio or turning it for the hot composting system, this is a good way to set it up so you always have something you're pulling from and one that's breaking down and one that you're adding to. For a hot system, you can have one that you're actively adding to. I have liked keeping like a pile of leaves next to my composter. So every time I add food scraps or other kitchen waste, I can just add leaves right on top. So I keep that ratio and it's easy to layer. And then you can turn that every once in a while. You can keep one of your bins open and turn it into the other bin. And then you can have one that is broken down and ready to use. So once you do have broken down compost, it is great for use in the garden. So we like using it as the final layer in our raised beds or for side dressing in your plant rows, or you can just mix it in directly with your soil. So you can see these are pictures from our greenhouses, and this is a picture of one of our satellite gardens. But we use a lot of compost. You can also make compost tea. So it's about 1 part compost to 5 parts water, and you'd put your compost in a burlap bag and let it sit for 10 days. And then you would spray that on your growing plants, or you would apply it directly to the soil. And this is a really, really great fertilizer for your plants during the growing season. It doesn't smell great, so just a heads up there. You can also use it in seed starting. It'll add a lot of nutrients that baby plants will need, and it will help retain moisture. So it's a really good ingredient for seed starting, but it holds a lot of moisture. So you don't want to just do straight compost for your seed starting. So a mix that we previously used is 4 parts compost and then 1 part perlite and 1 part vermiculite, which are both things that add some aeration into the soil. It's the little white spots when you get potting soil. And then you can also use it in your houseplants because it adds a lot of nutrients that your houseplants might need. But I would heavily recommend mixing it with a potting soil or a topsoil because otherwise it will just hold too much water and give your plants root rot. And that's especially true if your houseplants don't have drainage holes in the bottom. But there are a lot of houseplants that are heavy feeders and require a lot of nitrogen, so mixing in compost with their potting soil is really helpful. And that's my quick overview to composting. Does anyone have questions?
I have a question, Katie.
Mm-hmm.
This is Becky. I learned a lot. I've never um, uh, learned about composting, and so I'm excited. It seems more doable. But my question was, what do people do over the winter months with their compost? Do they continue to compost? I've heard of under the sink compost, and wasn't sure what I should be doing in the winter months.
Yeah, so in the winter, you can definitely add to your compost. Whether you're doing a hot system or a cold system, you can add to your compost. Yeah, so you just continue adding throughout the winter as long as you have space in your bins. And if you don't have space, you can always add another spot. Something I didn't mention when I am keeping my food scraps inside, because I rent, so I bring my food scraps somewhere else to compost them. So a lot of people, to prevent that from smelling and stinking up their kitchen, either put it in like an airtight container. So mine is like a metal bowl with a plastic seal around it, or they'll keep it in their freezer so it won't smell. And then when you have time, you can bring it out. There are some systems for like composting inside, but they're a lot more complicated. And I've never personally tried it. So I didn't include those, but you can look into that if you want. And then there's also worm composting, which you can do inside, where you use worms to break down food scraps. But that is also kind of a fussier system than just throwing your food scraps in a pile outside.
So Katie, so much good information. Is the cold composting maybe the best approach for a novice? You know, if I wanted to start this, and I love the trench idea, you just have to have enough space, but wow. So what is the most, if you want to just start as a beginner, what might be the most beneficial approach?
Most beginner friendly.
Yeah.
So I think it depends on how much time you have. Because if you're a novice, but you're like, yeah, I'm just vibing this summer, I got extra time. It's super doable to do a hot compost. But if you know like you're just gonna go toss your food scraps and go back to whatever you're doing, then a cold compost is much easier to maintain. Um, but if you have the time and you want to like get your compost quickly, hot composting is super easy, and you just need to make sure you have those brown materials to immediately layer over. So getting like leaves are a great option for brown material. So when I've set up new composting systems, we just make sure we have somewhere to keep leaves so that once you put your food scraps, you just throw some leaves over it. Super straightforward. And then maybe you could turn it once a week. If you're feeling really on it, you could turn it once a month. You could turn it once every 3 months. But that ratio is important. But cold composting, if you don't have that time, is a very good alternative.
Okay.
I would just recommend getting a lid on your cold composter so you don't have it smell.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So it looks like Jennifer from Foundation said they purchased the Miracle Grow Tower planters, and the center has a compost bin, and you have the compost water that comes out the bottom to rewater. It's been a great project for our kids. So Jennifer, jump on, unmute, and tell us about that, and then we'll have Katie share her thoughts too.
Okay, had to figure out how to unmute. I was on a different screen.
Okay.
But no, we love these tower planters. They have wheels and hold 48 plants in these little holes, and then you have the top. And so we were able to let each of our preschoolers plant their own vegetable plant and their own flower plant because we bought a couple of them. And so they helped assemble it, and put the dirt in, and they each have their own little compartment. So they're responsible for watering their own plant every other day. And then all of their fresh fruit and vegetables go in the center when they're done with their lunch and snack. And so when they go out to recess, they take their food scraps and put it in there. And then we grab a handful of either leaves or grass clippings to stick on top when they're done putting it in. And the plants look like they're on steroids. They've completely quadrupled in size. We have flowers, but they're growing a variety of different vegetables.
Great.
That is awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you're kind of integrating compost tea into it because you're just using the water that went through the compost. But yeah, it makes such a difference. I have seen some gardens where people just planted directly into topsoil and they just have really slow growth. And then they start relying on, commercial fertilizers, which is really expensive. But you can just mix in some compost and everything grows like crazy. It's wonderful.
Well, our kids think it's neat because they filled it to the top. And so, oh, we don't have any more room. And then the next day when they came back out, there was space for that day's fruit and vegetable peels and wastes and things. So they were kind of like, what's happening? So it was really neat. And then the water that comes out the bottom is like a coffee colored. So, we don't have the kids pour that and it stinks. And they're like, ew. But it seems to be really helpful to the plants. So we rewater with that, and then the kids water with their watering cans.
That's adorable also.
Hey Jennifer, where'd you purchase those containers, those tower plant containers with composting in the middle?
Online, I literally think it's called like the Miracle Grow Tower Planter.
Okay.
Like I Googled that. They come in 3 different colors. They're between $300 and $500, but on our side, coming up with the space, excavating the ground, putting a perimeter around it, trying to protect it from, we have deer and things in South Bend. And it was just kind of like, well, where are we going to find a space to put this? And so we saw those and thought, oh my gosh, that's perfect. And so far, so good.
Nice. That's great. Well, that's a great resource. Thank you for sharing. It looks like Brenda has a picture that she shared with us. They made this in her home, her last previous home with her kids, and they got the composter from Amazon. Way to go, Brenda. If you want
Yeah,
to share anything, just come off mute.
yeah. We don't have here in Manzanita where I work, but we did this at my home with my kids,
Yeah.
and they're the ones who take out all the compost to the composter. I just sent my son throw these things outside,
Yeah.
and this year at the beginning of the season, we used the compost that we got from the last year.
That's fabulous. Great. And just an Amazon purchase.
Yeah, and it was pretty cheap, like $25.
Yeah. Great. So doable. Both of these sound like they're really doable.
Yes.
Thanks, Brenda. Any
Yeah,
other comments, Katie?
I think it is a good thing to emphasize probably the pile you're adding to this year will be what's ready to use next year. So when you're planning your garden, that's a good thing to keep in mind. I do have I have it printed out here, but there's a backyard composting basics file that I'll put in the chat that I think is really, really helpful for if you just want to review really quickly.
That's great. Thank you.
That in the chat, and then I'll also put a link to the upcoming classes, community gardens, if you guys want to learn more about vegetables or come to garden club or just get to know more about the gardens.
Nice. Well, a huge shout out to you for all the information and resources. Your knowledge is amazing, and you have been so wonderful across the 4-part series. So everybody, let's Thank you, Katie. And then I also want to shout out to Becky Lees and Emily Evers from Purdue Extension because they have been instrumental as we learned about Master Gardener and what Purdue Extension does and the seed library and also those other seeds available. I don't remember what the plant was, but all of these have been fabulous. So a big thank you to Katie and Becky and Emily for their guidance, especially for those like me who had limited experience. So thank you. If there isn't anything else, I'm going to shift over to gardening and fostering social emotional learning and family engagement. But one last call for any questions or thoughts. Okay. Okay, I will now share my screen. Thank you. Okay, and then let me go ahead and present. Okay, there we go. So I don't know that everyone has met our Ready to Grow summer intern, Madeline Alford. She is a rising senior at Notre Dame, and I posted info about her on the Ready to Grow Facebook page, but I just want to give her a shout out for this nifty PowerPoint using Canva. I just love that these bugs dance around. So, thank you, Madeline, for not just designing PowerPoints, but for helping with content and emails and everything else. So here we go. These are our last two topics around gardening and engagement in your programs with families and also supporting SEL. Okay, let me see if I can get it to move. Here we go. There we go. So our presentation goals today is we're going to discuss how gardening fosters social emotional learning, a big topic in St. Joe County as we develop a community of practice around SEL and mental health in early care and learning programs. And then we're also going to explore ideas for engaging families in our program's garden and with the gardening process. So why did we decide to do a gardening initiative in our community? Well, it's certainly, and I hope this is happening in your programs, it's engaging for the children, DAP, hands-on, sensory-rich activity, connecting children to nature via their senses, and also with movement, as we know how important big body activity and movement is for not just muscles and bone and health, but also for brain development. We also love that gardening, whether it's at home or in our early childhood programs, that it encourages outdoor time, which is a screen-free activity. And it offers meaningful family and school family interactions and bonding, plus some fresh produce if you're lucky, right? And if the groundhogs or woodchucks don't get it first. Okay, so now a little bit about the SEL benefits from gardening. With just a little bit of tweaking with intentionality to your gardening conversations and storybooks, as well as discussions out in the garden or as you're preparing to go to the garden, all of these different areas are certainly fostered through the gardening process. You don't have to take any notes. We have developed two PDFs that Madeline's going to drop into the chat box at the end that encompass all of the strategies we're going to discuss across SEL and family engagement. And of course, these are just a few. There's so many out there, but we thought we would start with a few that resonated, that we have seen happen at ECDC or elsewhere, as well as we hope you'll share a few of your own as well. So, empathy and compassion, cooperation and communication, patience and delayed gratification in a natural way, not in a orchestrated or unauthentic way. Emotional regulation, just time with the greenery is so calming. But so is the movement involved with tending to gardens. Self confidence and accomplishment, problem solving, responsibility and accountability is learned naturally. And of course, our overarching macro connection to nature. So, as we think about empathy and compassion, a child notices a caterpillar and shares with their gardening friends. Let's be careful around the caterpillar, mentioning it's a pollinator and we need them because we've done stories and used puppets around pollinators, or just have seen them and discuss them, or noticing roly-polies in the soil and commenting, we must help protect the bugs like the roly-polies who are good for the soil, or even that the spiders and beetles in the garden are garden helpers too. They are pollinators and we need to help our plants and flowers um, grow through using pollinators, right? Or hosting pollinators. Learning how fragile baby plants and seedlings are, and to walk carefully around the baby plants in the garden using the stepping stones so we don't accidentally step on them. Tender caretaking duties throughout the season, preparing the soil to plant. Now we're adding composting, right? Planting, watering, observing, and harvesting. This just over and over, we're practicing taking care of living things, developing empathy and compassion. Cooperation and communication. And of course, we know these are big goals that we have, milestones and developmental goals for our young children. So, gardening can be a collaborative activity, encouraging teamwork and communication skills as children work together to care for their gardens or plants. Sharing the bounty of their harvest can also foster a sense of generosity and community. In my gardening experiences, we didn't always have a great bounty because we shared it with the woodchucks and the groundhogs. So we would often share, we would go to the farmer's market or elsewhere and buy some of what we're growing to share with our families because we had enough to be able to taste and snack, but we didn't have enough to share with all of our summer families. Um, when children are watering, they take turns filling their watering cans and hopefully independently using a big bucket so they can be totally self-directed. And of course, as early educators mentioned the importance of teamwork, it just supports that overall concept of working together to accomplish a goal. While harvesting, children take turns picking the beans or grape tomatoes or the cucumbers, so everyone has the opportunity and no one feels left out. As we talk about sharing gardening opportunities with everyone, we're certainly emphasizing and encouraging cooperation and communication. Patience and waiting, just like in the storybook Lola Plants a Garden. Children excitedly are curious, is it ready yet? Even when we do those little bean sprouts in a Ziploc bag on windows in the spring, or the little cups of grass that grows, the grass in the cup, or any flower for Mother's Day sometimes. The children are eager and they keep watching, and this is such a wonderful way to reinforce just natural waiting. It's coming, and we're going to watch it every day and look for change and progress. So, authentically practicing waiting and patience. This is one of the things I love best about gardening with young children is self-confidence and accomplishment. As children plant and water and learn the names of their plants, and now, like Jennifer mentioned, they're learning about the water that's full of nutrients from their composting. They develop a sense of accomplishment as he or she thinks or says to themselves, maybe not aloud, but I know how to do this. Their effectiveness with nurturing and caring for living things can significantly boost self-esteem, confidence, and feelings of competence, which is really the foundation of positive mental health. Being able to accomplish things independently is that foundational positive mental health. And then if you can extend your gardens to the families and have the children take their family through the garden, they'll be excited to point out the plants and explain what they are and how they planted them and how they care for them tenderly, sharing their experiences with confidence and pride in all their efforts. So patience, oh, we did this one already. Sorry about that. I thought we moved forward. Here we go. Emotional regulation. This is the one that also really resonated with me as I worked 2 summers with more than 150 preschoolers gardening. So, down at the bottom of this page, a child who is active and or feisty practices slowing down and being careful not to crush the seedlings while watering or weeding. And I would always just mention quietly to that child how I notice they're so focused as a gardener helping the plants. And then the child who is slow to warm, you can just see them blossom like a flower or plant as they gain confidence by joyfully engaging with watering of the plants, with independence and self direction. And of course, children who are more regular with temperament, not feisty or active or slow to warm, they are our peer models with the process. And so I love the way it supported emotional regulation, how gardening does that. And the other thing is that we know the best way for children to learn is through all their senses. And certainly, gardening encourages children to use all their senses as they are engaged with gardening. And I always felt like I wanted to have more sound in the garden. We would hear the birds, but when we were in the garden, the birds weren't there. So we always added chimes, just the ones you can buy at Lowe's. Um, that tinkle in the wind, but we put them on a shepherd hook. So the children, as they walked through the garden, could gently, and we would always emphasize that, but they had no problem with that, tinkle the chimes as they walked by, adding that element of listening. And then just the whole idea of not the whole idea, the whole activity of gardening is so calming. The watering, the observing, what's happening in the garden, scavenger hunts for bugs, looking for spider webs, looking for pollinators, observing the plants and their growth, just as a reset for moods and emotions for adults and children. So there's all this new research, and we didn't have time today or uh, the slide deck was large enough, right, Madeline? I always add so much, but there is research that will put some of the research how that documents how gardening is a not only mindfulness but resets moods for adults and children. Okay, problem solving. This is such a fabulous gardening benefit, right? The children notice the garden is dry and hard, and they suggest it's time to water, or they notice that the garden has really received a lot of rain, so we shouldn't water it today. Um, or that they plan together for watering across the weekends or during a break with intentionality, asking parents or making sure someone's available. Noticing the cucumbers and the tomatoes are drooping from heaviness and need support from a climbing trellis or a tomato cage or stakes. Noticing the groundhogs and the woodchucks are eating some of the plants, like down to the nub in our case. And together with the teacher, they do some research, and they decide to add pinwheels and chimes to the garden as a deterrent via the movement and noise the pinwheel and the chimes make. Dealing with Challenges like pests or unexpected weather can teach children valuable problem-solving skills with just a little bit of intentionality and scaffolding by the early educators. And when they find some solutions, building resilience and confidence in their ability to overcome obstacles. And of course, we know that responsibility with care and intention. Children take turns with the garden helper tasks, or maybe they have their own plants to take care of. They learn that their actions directly impact the well-being of their plants, and that encourages naturally responsibility while fostering a sense of duty naturally. And then our macro goal, the connection to nature. The garden explorations really just help us notice and value and treasure nature's treasures. Leaves, flowers, bark, grasses, stones, shells, insects, arachnids, crustaceans, garden mammal visitors, and so much more. These all are great mini studies of themselves, promoting a connection with and love for nature and our earth. The whole pollinator a role, leading to conversations about all living things have a role. Observing heavy rain and what that does to the garden, and also periods of no rain. Learning and exploring soil, the parts of the plant, seeds to seedlings to plant to harvest, as well as learning about garden tools and garden visitors, all through the five senses. So that connection to nature is pretty significant. So just because of time, and we have 10 minutes, I'm going to jump into some family engagement ideas, and then we can have time for sharing what you might have done or seen with your gardening with families or with SEL. So inviting families to help with planting, weeding, or harvesting, pair with a picnic or snack from the garden. Invite families to donate a plant for the garden, selecting it with their child and over the weekend and bring it in. Of course, that takes resources, but you could also give them the funds to help do that, those that want to. Families are invited to care for a garden bed or a container during a week or a break or a month. Let families sign up to water the garden over the weekend or the break. I'm thinking like a long weekend, like the 4th of July, if they're in town. Provide families with paper to create journals, to draw or write about what they and their children see in the garden, which is great for SEL reflection too. And asking families to find a picture or a photograph of a garden element and bring it in so you can all talk about it and share about it during a group discussion about gardening or visitors in the gardening or the garden helpers. So things like a pollinator, a bee, a sprouting seed, beautiful flowers, or interesting vegetables or fruit. Host regular story sessions featuring books about plants, nature, emotions, or community near the garden. So story times in the garden with families on a Friday, let's say, enjoying some produce that you're growing in the garden, or maybe doing that just as a gardening activity with your children every week. Having a picnic snack by the garden or yoga time by the garden. So all of these will be in a PDF. Invite families from different cultures to share plant names and gardening terms in their home language, and maybe even recipes. My daughter-in-law is Honduran, and her guac is to die for, as well as the way she uses cilantro, which just isn't a part of my cooking. So I have loved getting to know about cilantro and also recipes. Mine isn't as good as hers yet, but I'm practicing. So using the garden for mindful moments, encouraging our families to go to the garden with their child and have a quiet moment, or have the children and parents walk through or around the garden And with each other, their goal is to share one thing they're thankful for, or maybe two things, also something that appeals or is of interest to them. At home, they could paint rocks with kind words or lovely colors and place them around the school family garden to decorate. Host potluck or tasting events where families can try dishes made with garden produce. It was always my goal to do some sort of caprese salad with the tomatoes and basil that we were growing. But we never got to the point we had enough to share that with a large group because we shared it with the groundhogs. Um, Sending home simple recipes with families, as well as inviting families to come enjoy a salad bar or create one at home with their child, but giving them also some ideas on how their child can help or their children can help. Um, so offering, I love, like Katie has done for us, finding out a way to offer short family workshops on topics that are of interest. Of course, I think it's always great to ask families what they're interested, like we asked you all what topics you were interested in. Maybe it's pollinators, maybe it's composting, or maybe it's doing garden in the backyard near their garden at home. Um, Having a local expert answer questions in a casual drop-in format. Have a garden themed family evening, combine some crafts, snacks, and garden games together. Um, oh, have families help make signs for word walls or for the garden itself. Words like growth, patience, sun, and teamwork around the garden. And for children who are not reading independently yet, it's always best to have it be the picture, of course, and the word. Um, I think a copy of Lola waiting for her garden to grow would be great with the word patience or waiting. Um, and then mini garden kits. Send home a cup with soil and seeds so families can grow something together at home. And maybe you have extra plants when you buy plants for your program's garden. You could have a table where parents could help themselves to the extra plants that could go home with families. And then maybe a seed library or a seed swap, or even just making sure that your families know that we have a seed library thanks to Purdue Extension and our library's partnership that they can utilize in May uh, to add plants to their gardens. Okay, so time for questions. And also, I want to thank you all for engaging with this initiative. And I'd like to hear a little bit about your experiences. And oh, look, Madeline put the family engagement PDF and the SEL gardening PDF. So you have everything we talked about, you have in these two PDFs. Okay, so any questions, just jump off mute or put it in the chat box, whatever you're most comfortable with. Any thoughts? Well, I know everybody's busy, so maybe we just pull it to a close. I'll give one more minute for someone if they want to come off mute or put something in the chat box. And I just want to ask you to be on the lookout for the survey, the post survey feedback form or the post feedback survey that oh, look, Elena gave us pictures of her children gardening. Aw, thanks, Beth. I'm glad you've appreciated the whole series. I know I've learned a lot from the information shared by Katie, Becky, and Emily. I love that picture. Why don't we do that? Why don't you send pictures my way and I'll post them on Facebook and give you credit if you have permission for us to do that? That would be great. And the final report, which is due in September, I know you have a copy of it already, but make sure you upload some photos because I'll put them into a collage unless you want to put them into a collage and then upload a collage. And then I can share it with our funders because we want them to think that this is worthwhile and that we want to do it again, both the grant and more learning. Oh, Jessica, thanks. Nice. Oh, and Jessica's going to do some composting. Nice. Oh, more. Oh, and there's first English. Thanks, Tracy. Look at you. Those are great photos. Oh, this is better than any questions, you guys. Kids gardening, right? Aw. So watch for the email that will have the link to the feedback survey, that will have the recording, and it will also have all the resources shared today. So if you didn't catch the PDF or the resources from Katie, we will get that. We will share that in the email. And remember about the final report. And does anyone have anything else they want to say? Oh, look here. I think we're going to hang out just a little bit. This is one of those taller raised gardens. Easier on the back, right? For the early educators. I love that. So that's from Erin at, oh, we did a Mother's Day party kickoff and had moms help us plant veggies. What a great idea. What a great idea. So that's from Growing Kids, State Road 23, folks. Thanks, Erin, or Julia. I'm not sure who put that forward. It may have been Julia. Nice. Okay, another thank you to Katie Lane for today's composting. I'm going to talk to my hubby about it for us here at home. And then one of the things I wanted to do is visit a couple of places in our community. So I'm going to be reaching out adult field trips where we might meet at Unity Gardens or at Green Bridge Growers or elsewhere to have in-person visit and learning about those two organizations and maybe more. So have a great day, everybody. Oh, good. Thanks, Becky. We're glad you'll join us on the field trips. Okay, everyone, it's 2:01, and I know you all have busy programs to tend as well as your gardens, right? Take good care, everyone. Happy summer.